I'm holding in my hands the Lego version of Toyota's rear-wheel drive twin turbocharged 6-cylinder sports car, the Supra. And I'm standing next to Nissan's rear-wheel drive twin turbocharged 6-cylinder sports car. This is the 2023 Nissan Z. Now this is unofficially the 400Z because Nissan's done away with the numbers. They used to go 300Z, 350, 370, and now we're here with no numbers at all and just the letter Z, or Z to our American and international audience. Now I want to take this car on one last drive to verify here in this review to see if it's actually worth buying, or should you just save your money and go and get a Toyota Supra. Now before I start this review, make sure you go to productreview.com.au. Over there you can review your very own car and you can tell other Aussie buyers exactly what it's like to own your car. Now this is the base model Nissan Z, and there's nothing really base model about it. The pricing starts from $73,300 before on-road costs. That's just over $80,000 drive away here in New South Wales. Now to consider how cheap this is compared to the Supra, you have to know that the Supra costs $87,000 before on-road costs for their rear-wheel drive sports car. And there's plenty to love about this car for the price tag. First of all, the exterior. This is a striking car and there's no fake vents, which is a major plus point for a pure sports car like this. I'm a big fan of the bonnet design here. It's a carryover from previous generation Z cars, but I think the implementation is perfect. I do like the new Nissan logo. And then let's come around to the headlights, which have a LED daytime running light and LED headlamp, and also the grille here are both inspired from the 240Z. Now you're getting these 19-inch forged wheels wrapped in a Bridgestone rubber. There's a staggered setup here, so you're getting 255s up front and 275s at the rear. You're also getting massive red Nissan brake calipers. Along the side, this is what Nissan refers to as the katana blade. It does look like a Japanese samurai sword. You have another Z logo here. You do have keyless entry and locking, which is quite useful. And I think it was really cool to see Nissan keep true to the prototype of this car, and it really didn't deviate from that design all too much. Now I'm really liking how subtle the aerodynamics here are. You have a little flick up here at the roof and a really cool rear deck lid spoiler. Also on your deck lid, you have a little script on the glass which says since 1969, which is of course when the first Z car came out, which is a really cool touch. And also it's reversed when you look at it on the inside, so when you look in your rear vision mirror, you can see that script, and I think it's a cool touch. Now the taillights here are directly inspired from the 300Z, and they're some of the best taillights I've seen because the 90s had some of the best taillight designs, so it's cool to see that implemented here. And of course, to finish it all off, you do have some very real exhausts which look great. I love the design on them, but they could have sounded a little bit better. So I would probably go out into the aftermarket to make my car sound a little bit louder than what this sounds like. So take a listen. Now on the inside, you're getting these 3 gauges built into the dashboard like you've seen on previous generation Z cars, except this one reads out your battery voltage, your turbo speed, and your boost pressure as well. You have air vents in the shape of rectangles, which are the same we saw on the grille and also on the taillights. You have a pretty rudimentary touchscreen in the middle. It's nothing too advanced. I just see it as a screen to use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto on, but at least you have some physical controls on the outside. But I'm not a big fan of the massive black bezels on the outside. You have a dual tone interior with red and black being the theme here. You have Z carpets. You also have a digital driver's display, which is customizable and very responsive. I love this display. This steering wheel here is the party piece because Nissan realized that every time they released a car after the R32 GTR, people would just go to the aftermarket and swap out the steering wheel, but not with the R32 GTR. So then they went back to that car, got all the dimensions for the steering wheel and put it inside the Z. How cool is that? So this is the exact same dimensions and shape as the Nissan R32 GTR steering wheel, except with a few more buttons on it. We have a floor mounted accelerator. We do have a 3-pedal setup because this is the 6-speed manual. We have our auto rev matching button here. We have a push button start. We have heated seats. We have a boot release button and of course a manual handbrake. Now I do like the seat designs. They are inspired from the GTR, which is quite cool, and they are very grippy. I like how the electronic seat adjustment for both the passenger and the driver are found closer to the center center tunnel rather than being on the outside. As for storage, there is a glove box, and as for charging, you do have a USB-C and a USB Type A port, and you even have a 12-volt socket hidden down in the passenger footwell. And behind me, I have two little storage parcels, which are very useful, and there's even a second glove box behind the driver's seat. And no, there's no secret seats behind me. This is purely a two-seater sports car. Now, I also appreciated that this car has pretty good sound insulation, and you do have Bose speakers, so there are some creature comforts here, but mainly this is all focused around the driver and giving you as much information about the car facing the driver, and just letting the passenger have as much space and be relatively comfortable while the driver does their thing. Now let's talk about practicality. You have your boot release button here inside the badge, which is very clever and nice and clean. You have this rear hatchback, which opens to reveal just under 300 liters of boot space. My only complaint back here is the amount of harsh plastic, so if you have anything loose and you don't have a cargo net, it's just gonna make a complete racket. But what is good is that this area is accessible from the cabin, so that makes it easier on road trips to grab anything out of your bags. Now, talking about bags, apparently you can put 2 sets of golf clubs in here, and I can see how you could do that. There's plenty of cutouts, but it would be just a bit tight. Now, underneath the boot floor, there isn't a spare tire at all. It's just a tire repair kit, so you might want to have that roadside assist on standby. Now let's talk warranty and servicing for this $80,000 sports car. This thing comes with a 5-year unlimited kilometer warranty, and you can also prepay for services costing you either $1,338 for 3 years or $2,491 for 5 years. And also, it's worth noting that your service intervals are every 12 months or every 10,000 kilometers. So it's a little bit shorter in terms of the kilometer side compared to, say, a hatchback or just a daily driver. Now, this car's just a little too new to have any owner reviews over at productreview.com.au to get a sense of what it's like to live with over a long period of time when it comes to reliability. But the previous generation of this car, the 370Z, has been rated and tested by our users at productreview.com.au, and they say that the 370Z scores a 4.6 out of 5 on average as an ownership experience, which is quite good, and it's overwhelmingly positive for a sports car, which means it's relatively cheap to run, easy to live with, and has few issues. So hopefully that's a good sign for this car here. But it is worth noting this is a twin turbocharged motor. It's not naturally aspirated like its predecessors, so hopefully that doesn't cause too many issues. So yes, we have launch control, which is always on in the manual, and you put your foot on the clutch, foot on the accelerator, it activates, and you're good to go. This thing flies. So under the bonnet, we have 298 kilowatts and just under 500 Newton meters of torque. This is a 3-litre petrol V6 twin turbo engine, and it is pretty brilliant. Now, the complaints from the last generation was it sounded a bit trombone-y. It had a bit of an odd sound to it, but I think maybe the turbos have fixed that. I don't mind the sound of this V6 at all, and I know what people are talking about in the previous generation, although it does need just a little bit more exhaust sound, some burble, some pop, some overruns, something. I don't want it to be obnoxious, but I just want a little bit more character from it. Now, let's talk about straight onto steering feel. Since we're going through this twisty bit of road to really nail down this car and figure out if it really is one of the best Japanese sports cars you can buy this year. So the steering feel is pretty good. There is a distinct lack of feel a little bit for a car like this. I would have liked to have felt just a tiny bit more of the road through my fingertips, especially when they've employed such an awesome steering wheel. This steering wheel, obviously, like I said, is from the R32 GTR, and it even has little finger grips on the back, which is just such a cool thing. And just means that just makes it really easy to hold and handle this car. And then I've heard some complaints that this steering wheel is just slightly too big, and I can see what they're saying, but to be honest, I prefer this over a flat bottom steering wheel every single day. Now, as for the suspension tune, it is a bit on the softer side. It's nothing that's gonna fall apart through a corner. It's got really good flow to it, but it isn't like rock hard. So you're not gonna feel everything through your butt, and it is pretty well ironed out, but it is still very responsive. And you do have enough here to have a bit of fun with, and you do have plenty of rigidity as well, thanks to a front and rear strut bar. And that front strut bar is also adjustable, which is pretty cool. Now this shifter, I initially thought it was just a little bit too plasticky for my liking. It doesn't detract from the experience, but it just would have been cool to have that same linkage like you'll find in an MX-5 or even the GR Corolla or Yaris, because those have very nice shifters, and I just would have liked to have seen that copied here. Instead, it just feels a little bit plasticky, but it still feels and looks pretty good, and it's just so much better to change your own gears, so most is forgiven. Then you've also got an S mode here. I thought it was a sport mode, but it's not. This is the automatic rev matching button. You press and hold it to disengage it and engage it, but I like leaving it on because it just makes shifts that much smoother. And if you have passengers who hate manuals because they're so used to how jerky they are, well, that's your solution right there. Now, as for the brakes, if we do an emergency brake test in 3, 2, 1, yeah, pretty good. That's all right. So yeah, these brakes do hold up pretty well. I'm guessing a brake upgrade is also coming for the supposed Nismo version, so that's apparently on the way, and that might come with a bit of a beefier set of brakes. These are still very good, and they handle a car of this weight relatively well, so there's no complaints with the braking. It's a little bit responsive for some at low speeds, so I did find it a little bit like, oh, hang on, these are a bit grabby, but that's exactly what you want, and it's very easy to get used to, but it might be a bit of a transition if you're used to driving, say, like an SUV or something with a spongier setup. Now, what I love about this Z car is that it has perfect flow. It's really nice to jump in, you have a great driving position, you have a really nice steering feel, you have obviously a manual shifter, and you can go through and really enjoy corners with ease. Now, this gear ratio setup is a bit on the longer side, so you're not going to be changing as frequently as you might like, and you'll be low down the rev range most of the time if you're driving around the city. And that's a bit of a problem because the twin turbos in here don't like kicking up a gear until you're, say, going into 4,000, 5,000 RPM, and then you still got plenty to go until redline of just over 7,000 RPM. And that just means, like, say if you're in third right now and you're around 3,500 revs, you put your foot down and then it goes off. So the turbo lag is real, but it's not the end of the world, but it is definitely noticeable in here. And I just love this amount of power. 400 horsepower seems to be the perfect setup for a sports car like this. It's not too much where you're sort of getting a bit scared of it, but it's enough to have fun with and also know that you have plenty under your right foot. Now, if you want to know about fuel economy, I've actually been averaging around 10 litres per 100 Ks when I've been doing lots of highway driving, but you'll easily see that go up to 15 litres or maybe even 16 litres if you're having a bit of fun and you're in the city. What's obvious is the weight of this thing. It is a bigger sports car compared to, say, something like a Mazda MX-5 or a GR Yaris, but you definitely can feel the weight here. The other thing that you can hear is a lot of road noise on some rough roads. Even though this car has plenty of sound deadening and technology to try and reduce any sort of road noise, make it a little bit more of a luxurious driving experience, yeah, it's still a bit obvious in here. But to be honest, once you're on some smoother bit of tarmac out on the highway, it's not too bad. Now, what I'm really interested in is how much grip this car has. So we have a staggered tire setup, and I found that the back does not want to kick out as much as you might think. Now, you do have a giant button here to turn on traction control to do everything silly you might need to do, like a burnout or, you know, maybe a bit of drifting, which I would love to do in this on a track session, but most day-to-day stuff, you don't really want to be doing that. So I found the electronic stability control in here to be really quite effective. And now what sets this apart from something, say, like a GR Yaris or GR Corolla is just the fact you're sitting further back towards the rear wheels, you have a giant bonnet, and you just have this old school rear wheel drive sports car driving experience, something I'm really excited about. I get really quite enthused about a car that's got a manual transmission, a good engine, and a really nice driving position like this with the engine up front. I love a mid-engine sports car and I love a hot hatch, but this just feels like the pure driving experience. And especially when you hit roads like this, you just feel like you're right in your element when you have the perfect amount of grip, which I think this car does deliver, and you've also got a pretty good amount of feel through the chassis and the steering wheel. You just have a good time wherever you go. I found the cornering ability of this car to be quite fantastic, and it just means that it doesn't really translate any of those G-forces of the cabin until you're really pushing that sort of 7 to 8 tenths of this car. So if you're just sort of cruising and you're sort of driving going around 4 to 7/10, you're not really going to be feeling those corners, and your passenger isn't going to be too upset with you because they're not going to be thrown around, especially thanks to how grippy these bucket seats are, which I found to be quite grippy even though they're not too aggressive, and they are very comfortable, so I do enjoy using them quite a lot. I think Nissan have cooked up the best sports car from Japan in 2023. Now look, against this competitor like the Toyota Supra, it's significantly cheaper, and to be honest, I wouldn't really see a reason to go up the Toyota Supra unless you like the design and maybe you want a slightly faster car. And I really think this is quite an engaging car, and I really appreciate that's what Nissan set out to do, because they said it wasn't all about getting the fastest 0 to 100 times. Although this is a quick car, it's all about the driver engagement, and there's plenty of that in this car. So what you have here is the best execution of a modern day 240Z, except this one has twin turbochargers, and you've also got Apple CarPlay.